Okay, now is the time where we start putting a lot of these skills together. This project is going to be a little bit harder. We are going to create a modal from scratch. Now, if you don't know what a modal is, it's, whenever you click a button and then like the background of the page sort of goes black or dark, and then you've got like a little internal window inside of your page. That's what a modal is. We're going to create one of those from scratch. Now, if you don't know a lot of CSS, that's okay. Your modal does not have to be beautiful by any means. It just needs to be functional. That's the key to JavaScript, is functionality. So what I would like you to do is create a button that's going to open a modal. Create a button that's going to close the modal. And then I want you to write all of this inside of an object or a class. It's up to you. If objects make more sense to you at this point, write it in an object. If a class makes more sense to you, write it inside of a class. Make sure you have your functions or your methods inside of your object and your class, and do whatever you need to do to make this work. Now, you're also going to have to write a little HTML because your page requires the actual modal structure. I say requires very loosely. It doesn't actually require it. You could also get JavaScript to create that dynamically if you wanted to. For this, you're going to need to write a few event listeners, and you're also going to need to write them inside of an object or a class. So if you mix those two together, you should be able to create a modal fairly easily. Once again, this is not necessarily about beauty, it is about functionality. You can always make something nicer to look at using CSS. That's totally fine. That's more of a CSS thing. We want to do just JavaScript, so focus largely on functionality. Give this a shot. Try to do it on your own without Googling anything, without having to reference other videos. Make your brain sweat. This mini project, this object-oriented programming modal, is supposed to be a little more difficult. Get as far as you can with this. Try to figure out the solution on your own. But you know what? If you really get stuck and you just can't make any more progress, you can definitely reference the other videos, hop on the old Google machine, or just watch the rest of this video because I'm about to show you the way I would do it. But give this a shot. I'm going to fade this out to black, and then you can hit pause. And then either when you're finished or if you get stuck, you can just resume this video and you can see the way I would do it. So let's go ahead and give this a shot. Okay, first things first, we need the actual modal HTML. So I'm going to create a div in here, and I'm going to do some gross inline styling. So style, position, absolute. Actually, let's do position fixed, top 50%, left 50%, border 1 pixel solid red. This is going to be super ugly. Background color is going to be red as well. The width is going to be 50%, and we're going to give it a padding of 20 pixels. Let's see what this looks like. Yeah, okay, so it's, a big red ugly box. Let's transform, translate -50%, -50%, and there we go. It is in the center of our page. Let's go ahead and just move that over. So it is in the center of our page now. And lastly, we want to display none. Make sure it doesn't show up at all. There we go. It's as if it never even existed. Next, we need to be able to grab this. So let's go ahead and give this a class, JS modal. And while we're doing this, you know what? We might as well throw this into proper CSS as well. So let's grab that. And let's give this a class of just a regular modal. Throw our class up here, style.modal. And I'm just going to touch this up. Select all the semicolons, new line, bam, just like that. And just to make sure this is working, let's get rid of display none. And it's still not showing up. And I bet you that's actually because I have Bootstrap installed. So I'm going to uninstall Bootstrap. Get out of here, Bootstrap. We don't need you. We know how to write our own CSS and JavaScript now. Let's go ahead and get rid of display none. Bam, there it is. Okay, cool. Yeah, it was a Bootstrap thing. And it was just using the class of modal. So we got rid of that, and now we have complete ownership over it. Okay, we need to create a button that's going to open the modal, and we need to create a button that's going to close the modal. So let's create a button here, a regular button, class, JS, open modal. That's all it's gonna say. Big ugly button, and currently does nothing. Now let's go ahead and create an event listener for open modal. So open button, so const open btn is equal to document.querySelector .js open modal. There's only one, so we can totally use query selector instead of query selector all. And we can do open btn .add event listener. It's a click. Function is going to be the event. And all we want to do is grab the modal and display it. So now we need to grab the modal. Const modal is equal to document.querySelector .js modal. We're just going to select this. And we're going to say modal.style.display is equal to, let's just change it to initial, which is going to be whatever it was before we told it to be display none. Refresh our page. Aha, it works. I mean, it only opens, but that's pretty good. Okay, let's actually go and style this up just a little nicer because that red is just phenomenally terrible. Width of 80%. Let's add a max width, 800 pixels for super huge browsers. Border is going to be 1 pixel solid, black. Background is going to be white. Let's add a box shadow. 5 pixels, black. Display none, remove that. Good enough. Again, we're not looking for beauty, we are just making sure that this works. Let's go ahead in our modal, let's add a title. This is a modal. Paragraph, lorem 50. And if we refresh our page and open, this is a modal. And it just layers on top of the rest of the page. Now we need a close element in here. So let's go ahead and add a button in here. Button, class is equal to JS, close modal. We could also get it by its ID if we wanted to. It doesn't really matter. Close modal. And now we need to add the close event. So let's do this. And I know I said let's do this in objects or inside of a class, and we're going to. But because we're learning JavaScript, it's going to be easier if we write the way we know and then sort of make it more advanced from there. So we have an open button. Now we have a close button. And it is very, very similar to the open button event listener. So modal.style.display is going to be display none. Let's go ahead. We have an error. What does the error say? Close button is null. And it's because it's not JS button modal, it's JS close modal. If you're screaming at your screen saying, Caleb, you did it wrong. Good catch. Okay, no more error. Open modal, close modal, open modal, close modal. Okay, we're getting pretty close. Now the last thing we needed to do was we needed to write all of this inside of an object or a class. Now again, because we're new to JavaScript, we're not going to immediately throw all of this into an object or a class. We're going to write it the way we know how to write it. And then we can make it more complicated. So let's go ahead and create a class. So class, let's call it modal. We could have a constructor in here and it could do some stuff. And then we could have, let's make that a little bigger. And then we could have an open method. And then we could have a close method. And so let's uncomment that. Okay, and then in our constructor, what is a piece of data that we need to access throughout the constructor, the open, and the close methods? Well, we need the modal. Every single time we need that modal. And we don't use consts in here because if we want to access the modal inside of the open and the close method, we do this.modal is equal to the only modal on the page. Then what happens when we say open? Well, we need to open this modal. So we're going to grab this and we're going to say this.modal, that's this guy here, .style.display is equal to initial. And then we're going to close it by basically doing the same thing. This.modal.style.display is equal to none. Okay, let's give that a quick save and refresh. Do we have any errors or warnings in here? Nope. Does that work? Nope, because modal is not defined anymore. And that is because we have event listeners in here that are looking for this. So instead what we can do is we can actually do a mix here. So we have a regular modal, and let's go ahead and just paste this stuff down here. But now we actually need to define this modal. So what we could say is const modal is equal to new modal. And instead of setting this, we could do modal.open. And in here, we could do modal.close. And in fact, we could actually keep all of this together. That does not need to be above modal at all. And so what we did was we just took our hide the modal and open the modal, that kind of functionality, plus the actual selector itself, and we put it into its own class. And now we could just do like modal.open, modal.close, and refresh our page. This is a modal, closes the modal. Aha! So that's pretty nice. And just like that, we have a working class with a constructor, this.modal, which allows us to use this.modal across multiple methods. And then we just change the styling. We used a query selector in there. We used a few other query selectors. We created a new modal, and then we added a few event listeners. Now, what if we wanted to extend this? We could easily extend this. What if we wanted to change the title and the text? Well, let's go ahead and change this. Class.js modal title, class JS modal text, and we could, fill this with regular defaults, and we could also change these as well. So we could do something like this. Constructor is going to take a title. It's also going to take some text. And right away we could do this.modal.query selector. We could find JS modal title, change that inner text to title, not text. And then we could do the same thing again with the text is equal to text. And so what this is saying is we already have the modal. This is our element node. And then we're going to find a new one in here, just the first one called title, and then the second one called text. There we go. And set the inner text to the title and the text. Let's make this optional though. So let's say if title does not equal undefined, now we can actually set this. If text does not equal undefined, now we can actually set this as well. And so when we refresh, open modal, close modal, that works. What if we wanted to open our modal with a new title? New title and new text. New text in here. So this is what it currently looks like. This is a modal, bunch of lorem ipsum. Refresh, this is a modal, new title, new text in here. In fact, we could actually even take this one step further, and we could say this.title is equal to title, this.text is equal to text, and then we could throw this into its own method as well. So let's go ahead and say new method, change content. This does not need to take anything. Let's just throw this in here. And we're going to say if this.title is not undefined, this.text is not undefined, then we're going to grab the modal, also select the title from inside of it, then select the text inside of it. And instead of title, we want this.title, this.text. And again, we're doing this because this was set up here. We've got title. For all we know, this is actually just undefined. We could even set a default in here. So let's set a default. Default title. And let's set a default text in here. Default text. Okay, let's go ahead. Refresh this page. Missing a parameter. Where are you missing something? Text is equal to default. There it is. Thank you, console, for helping me out with that, or debugger rather. Let's go back to the console, refresh. No errors. Open modal. This is a modal. The reason it didn't change is because we didn't actually use change content yet. So let's open up modal. We have this. We've got an object with a bunch of stuff in here. We've got modal, title, and text. The modal property is the actual node element itself. So let's do modal dot, and what do we have in here? We have close if we wanted to, modal dot open if we wanted to, modal dot change content, and there it is. Okay, so that was some fun modeling we did there. We did quite a few things. We extended it a lot more than I actually had anticipated extending this. But I think this is actually a pretty good exercise to create your own modal. If you aren't great with CSS, don't forget, you can always just copy my code here. That'll create a basic modal for you. I went way above and beyond what this original task was asking for, but I also think I showed some cool things in here for you as well. In fact, there's actually one more I want to show you. One more is we don't have to use title and text at all. Let's go ahead and let's get rid of this.title. And let's get rid of this.text. And we could say right in here, title and text. And then if we refresh, open Modal, we have a modal in here, dot change content. Title is going to be new title. Haha! Modal dot change new title to and new text in here, just like a regular function. So now we're actually passing in parameters into a method. And you could write that code out in here as well if you wanted to. So there you have it. That is how I would create a modal using JavaScript classes and a few event listeners, actually just a couple event listeners. And I even changed some of the content in there as well. Feel free to replicate this. Feel free to steal this exact code and just tinker around with it and figure out how it works. If you're satisfied with your solution or you're satisfied with my solution, we can head on over to that next video.